It's Dee Dee on the spot.
Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to my guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone if you enjoy this content to please like and subscribe down below. We greatly appreciate it. We have Lee Spears on the show today. He's from LS Management and Productions. Lee, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing fabulous. So, when you were starting out, when you were first in your band, what was the name of your band and what did you guys play?
Well, the last band I was in was called Elysian Fields. We were mostly covers, but I did write a song called You Tell Me. It was the only original we had, and I don't play guitar, so I just picked up a guitar, started with some power chords, and I'm like, hey, this sounds cool, and handed it over to my guitar player, and I'm like, let's do something with this. And I'm like, okay. So we just built a song after that. That was the last band the last performing band I was in. I lived in Sweden for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And I did have a band while I was over there, and we were called Temple of Dreams. We were 100% original. We only performed once, and it was a song called Half a Heart, which was basically it was a song I wrote about how I had a broken heart, and someone came into my life and made it whole again. Was kind of where that came from. So that's.
So how was it like in Sweden? I mean, you're the first person on here that we've had that's lived internationally. What would you say are some of the big differences between Sweden and here?
Sweden, music is more respected. Music is looked upon as a true art form, no matter what genre you're in, whether it be classical all the way up to death metal. I mean, Scandinavia is where death metal comes from. And I just, it's kind of nice to be able to actually, you can walk down the street being goth, being into death metal or what have you, and actually still have that kind of respect from people because you went to school, you learned your instrument, your talent, you perfected it. And, a lot of musicians over there, it's like, you'll see one guy at a death metal concert, that same guy will be over here at a jazz and blues festival. Their respect for music is a little different than ours, I think.
Did you find it easier then with that respect to kind of get a band going, or was it a little more difficult? And is their style of music a little bit different, or the genre, is it basically the same?
No, I'd say it's actually easier to get a band started over there because you have so many musicians who are wanting to put together good quality bands or wanting to get together with other good musicians and talented individuals, and not just musicians, but we're talking light techs and talking management and what have you, that kind of thing. And the venues are more open to bringing in bands and actually paying bands for their time. Where I know it's kind of difficult for venues to do that over here because there is such a saturation of bands. But I don't. I know it's definitely a lot easier, and the genres are pretty similar. But the really big thing in Sweden actually is metal. It really is. Well, that and Eurovision, but we won't talk about that. But actually, some of the heavy metal and hard rock, like one of the biggest acts in Sweden are generally sleaze rock, like 80s style sleaze rock, like Motley Crue style kind of music, and they kind of brought back the 80s inspired music. But one of the bigger big exports of Sweden in the last I don't know how many years was In Flames, and they're huge in Sweden, they're huge in America, and it's just but. I'd have to say just basic rock and roll and metal is actually probably one of the more biggest genres there is. But their genres over there, they kind of run the gamut. Everybody, you could be AOR, you can be heavy metal, you can be rock and roll, but everybody still works together.
Yeah. I do have to ask this, though. Is ABBA still really huge over there?
They have a museum.
They have a museum?
They have a museum in Stockholm.
Wow.
If you're lucky to get a ticket for it, you have to buy ticket months in advance to get in. I actually got to meet two of ABBA's members. I actually worked for one while I was living in Sweden. He owns a cafe and hotel. And before I applied, I didn't realize who the owner was, and I actually got to meet him. So Benny Andersson of ABBA is the owner, and I actually got to meet him on chance. And the conversation was quite funny because he's like, oh, I'm sure you've heard of my band. I was in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm like, yeah, didn't you guys have like a song called like Disco Princess or something? It was all a joke, of course. I know the song, but so I get to meet two members of ABBA, but those Yes, ABBA is huge in Sweden.
Yeah, that's great. So how did you find the adjustment coming back to the U.S. after you kind of been in a place that's a lot more creative, or a lot more giving back to the artists like Sweden is? Did you find the transition difficult when you came back here?
I have to say that, I mean, I was more a listener when I got back to the States, not as much of a performer. I mean, my performances were more or less karaoke lined. I did perform and compete in some contests here vocally, but it was nothing heavy metal or rock and roll even. Actually, I did more club and dance music at the time, and more classical style singing. And when I got back here, but it's like, the music was definitely different. And it's like, I don't listen to radio, but radio over here is nothing but Taylor Swift and Jason Mraz and all of that, which some of those artists are talented. But, you turn on a radio station in Sweden, you can actually hear, rock and roll. You can hear, bands like In Flames and stuff on just basic radio stations throughout the day. So it was a little bit of it was a culture shock to move back to America from Sweden.
Yeah. So how did you get started with LS Management and Productions? Is there what's the backstory between that?
Well, I was working for a small social media company earlier this year, and I decided to part ways. But before that happened, one of the bands that was part of that company asked me to be their manager. Like, we love you, you understand what we want, you understand where we're going. And I'm like, look, I've never been a manager before. I've been a performer. They're like, but we don't care. We trust you. And that was Amsterdam. Amsterdam's like, we want you to come on board. We want you to be our manager. And it just kind of just took off from there. I went from being just a band manager who did some social media PR to being now manager of 3 bands, and I do social media PR for several other than that. And now I'm booking tours from bands for a band from Orlando that's coming up. I've got a national act from Texas that I'm booking for. I've got a band from Pennsylvania that I'm booking for a few shows here next year. I do booking for I've got bands who ask me to book them when possible here in Chicago too. And so within just a few short months, I've gotten respect and trust from these bands, and it's just exploded in the last few months. I even have a nightclub up in the suburbs of Milwaukee who wants me to book and promote for them as well. So it's just kind of snowballed from there, and I'm very humbled and very happy about it. It's like, so.
So is the use of social media when it comes to promoting, obviously it's huge over here, is it different in Sweden, or do they use social media as effectively as we do when it comes to promotions?
I think it's a 50-50 split. I think America is more, I want to say that, all countries use social media to its extent. But where I believe Sweden is still, or even Europe, is more about print. You will go walk up and down streets and just see litters of posters everywhere. And I think that's one thing that a lot of promotional companies here kind of miss is the old-fashioned print poster, which I do. If I have a gig or whatever, I get a print poster. So I mean, that's where they differ. So social media, yes, they do use social media quite a bit, but we do use it. I think we use it just a little. We rely on it a lot more.
Yeah, I started doing that too. I mean, when I was first promoting, I had my posters out, and I actually had, I put a little number on the back, like a company number, and then I put a link to my bit, and I had 10 people text me saying, hey, found your poster, subscribed, thanks a lot. So it's still not definitely a dead thing. I mean, it still can be used if you know how to use it effectively. But when you were starting out your business, what would you say is your biggest struggle, and how did you overcome it?
I'm still overcoming it. It's that level of trust. These venues don't know who I am. They don't know who Lee is. They don't know LS Management and Productions. They don't, they don't know of that. But I'm starting to get that kind of a contact or that connection with some of these venues here in Chicago. Luckily, I've met great people who believe in where I'm going, and what I want to do. So I'm able to get over that. But I'd have to say that's probably the biggest struggle. Right after that would have to be waking up every morning and remembering I have a business that I have to run, even though I have to go to work at a second job. I mean, I have a job that I do besides this that actually brings in money right now. LS management, the music industry is great. If you're on the radio, you get a lot of money, but I'm not after this to get rich. I'm after to make a living off of it eventually, but I'm ultimately out there to try and get these bands noticed, recognized, and get them out there where they're supposed to be going, because I didn't get to do that. So I'd have to say just the trust and the respect from the venues. And after that, it's just the drive, because I have to remain driven to keep this going.
I was going to wait until later to ask, but your other thing, For All Paws, could you maybe explain what that is and what you do there?
For All Paws is a company that my fiance and I run together. It is a pet sitting business. We pet sit for, if you've got a pet, we'll sit it. I mean, that's pretty much it. We are, all inclusive. We do anybody. Like right now, actually, that's why I've been so busy. It's like when you've got one job, and then I've got LS, and then I got For All Paws. So I kind of stay busy. I'm at home right now, which is kind of unusual for me. I have like 3,000 vinyl that I don't usually get to listen to anymore because I'm not here.
Yeah. What how's that experience generally been? Because with pet sitting, there's a lot of stuff that, I mean, people would think that it's maybe just like an easy gig, but there's a lot of things. Like I pet sit before. It's a lot of stuff that people wouldn't think of. How's your experience generally been doing that?
I haven't had any issues. We've got a lot of return clients. We have a lot of, and the clients are the pets, not necessarily that's what I call them. The clients are the dogs or cats or birds. We've got one bird we do sit for, as a return client. Most of our clients are return. We did add on a few. Busy season is definitely through the summer, but the hardest things to do is just make sure that, the one thing that I try to tell people that have offered to help us is, remember that this pet is somebody else's. Treat it as if it were your own. Play with it, feed it, water it. Take it out for a run. Just make sure it gets loved, and that's what we're pretty much trying to do. We're just trying to be surrogate parents for a few days.
Now, you're very busy. I mean, you do this and then you run your own company. How do you find time to kind of get away from work and kind of have your own peace and quiet? Has that been a struggle for you?
I wouldn't know what that is. To be honest, I don't think I've had much downtime since LS has kind of taken off as much as it has. My peace and quiet actually is like this evening, I'm getting ready to go get some meat on the grill. And that is like my zen. Right after music, cooking. I studied cooking while I was in Sweden. I've been cooking since I was a kid, so that's kind of like, if I'm not creating music, I'm doing something with cooking. So that's for about an hour. It's nothing to do with LS. It's nothing to do with For All Paws. It's me, Lee, the fiance, and part of the family kind of guy.
I was going to say, my family's very Norwegian, so we still have lefse and lutefisk during the summer and winter, so we have some of that Scandinavian food, which is really good. What was your favorite dish from Sweden that you picked up? It's
not lutefisk. No, that wouldn't be it. I couldn't stand that stuff. My favorite, actually, never really had one particular favorite. It was just, there's so much good food in Sweden. What we call a Swedish meatball is, just FYI for all of those who are watching, it's not really a Swedish meatball. A Swedish meatball is a meatball, basically. That's it. But it was just good, simple cooking that tasted so good. Like my former mother-in-law, she was always in the kitchen cooking something, and she made some of the strongest coffee. And that's one thing when you get to be overseas is the coffee is so strong it will strip the wax off the floor. Not kidding.
Jeez.
But after a while, I got so used to it, I can't drink like if you went to like a diner or whatever. That to me, it just tastes like coffee flavored water. So I'd have to say the coffee was like one of my favorite things to take away from Sweden.
What was the first show that you booked with LS Management and Productions? Do you remember where it was and what the band was?
Well, I mean, if I want to really go back to that would be my benefit that I have. It's called Rock for a Cure earlier this year. It may not have been under LS Management, but it was under LS that it was booked. And it was Jury of Fears, 13 Monsters. Oh my gosh, my brain's just lost me. Bubbles Erotica closed out the night for me. I had Guardsmen, which Guardsmen's are a good friend of mine, and a little project I worked on with some music that I actually worked on in Sweden. It was never meant to be played live, and I played it for Rob and Steve Harwood of Guardsmen. I'm like, dude, you need to do something with this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I created Orchestra in Black, and it's basically my little music project whenever I want to pick up and get a hold of Rob and Steve from Guardsmen. So that was what it is.
Yeah. When it comes to booking a band or having them work with you, do you have kind of a checklist of what you need to see from the band in order for them to work with you, or are you kind of flexible?
I am flexible, but there still has to be that checklist. You still have to make sure you're getting a band that is willing to put in the 100%. Mm-hmm. If you're playing in front of 5 people, if you're playing in front of 500, that show should still be the exact same quality. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't put off that show, those 5 people can go back and go, yeah, well, they were okay. They've got to have drive. They've got to have talent. They've got to be able to, say, hey, I gave 110%. And I have to tell you that Bubbles Erotica, the night of that Rock for a Cure benefit, they threw down like they just threw down in front of 200 people. Mm-hmm. The singer was electric. He was all over. He just had a blast. And everybody actually that night was. So that is actually, yes, I do have a checklist, and that is one of the prerequisites. Bring the energy like you were going to play in front of 5 or 500, no matter what. Make sure it's the same show. Do
you represent multiple genres, or are you more genre specific?
At the moment, I do have more or less the same genre, but it's more or less rock or rock metal centered. Amsterdam is goth horror punk metal. Black in the Day, which is one of the newer bands that I manage, they're what I would call more prog metal. Jazz metal is what they like to call it. I call it prog metal. And then some of the other bands that I work with is like, I'll book you. If I can figure out a place to put you, I'll book you. So, but just the bands that I manage, they're pretty much metal centered.
When it comes to music, I know just like a lot of things in life, a lot of it depends on like who you know. If you know that one person, you can become like super successful and it can really, really help you. But being someone who starts their own company, what strategies did you kind of use in order to kind of make inroads with like venues and businesses? How did that work?
I picked up a phone. That's really what it was. It's like I just started emailing these venues and saying, hey, my name's Lee. I own and operate LS Management. And from there, I just kind of started just, like I said, it was just really just that. It was like, why be afraid of reaching out to these places? It's kind of like pushing your demo out to a record label. You're going to get rejected. Everybody has growing pains. And being so new, I mean, I'm only a few months old. But like I said, in a few months, I've gotten all this respect. And that's where a lot of venues, after a while, they'll be like, we can see that you've got respect. We see you're in line with great people. And I've had a lot of help along the ways, but just people saying, hey, he's a pretty good guy. And I always give back. And it's like, so yeah, just reaching out, grab a phone, or send an email. That's about how it goes.
That's the thing I always say. Like, people always ask me, how do you get all these guests on the podcast? And I say, well, I just usually message them, and most people are like willing to come on. I mean, it's just as simple as that. People think it's like some big thing where you got to like go to extreme lengths. It's like, no, you can just, with today's technology, it's fairly easy. But what would you say is your overall goal that you have with this? How long are you willing, or how far up are you going until you kind of like reach a point where you're like, okay, we've really made it? Like, what is that end goal?
When I've got a high-rise office in downtown New York with a corner view, and I'm basically people are coming into me saying, "Hey, we want our band on your company." Yeah. That's the end goal. Yeah. When I can relax and really actually enjoy music, the music industry again, which I still do. It's a lot of fun going to these different shows and finding these different bands and what have you, but that's the end goal. And but even after that, I'm still going to be pushing. I'm always going to be a driven person when it comes to doing this. So even if I do get that corner office window view, it's still going to be a drive for me. So
yeah. All right, so now we go to the fun part of the podcast, or our most popular part, where I ask you 5 questions. We have them all. We have all the results. I take all the results, and then we tally them up. And I think once we reach podcast 50, I'm going to unleash the answers, kind of add them up. We're at podcast 39, I think, right now. So we're getting there, people. But for our first question, and this is more of the artist side, and then I'm actually going to add a few ones for your business at the end, and that'll be like sort of our own sort of thing. But for the first one, out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you personally wish that you had come up with yourself, and why?
Purple Rain.
Purple Rain, yep.
It's a simplistic song. It's from the heart. The words are poetry. Mm-hmm. It was written by a musical genius, and that's pretty much why. I wish I could have been Prince.
Mm-hmm. A musical genius who I live 10 minutes away from.
And I've been to Minneapolis twice now, and the first time I went up there, that was the reason. I went to Paisley Park.
Yep. The night he died, I drove past it just to see like all the cameramen and whatever. It's only like a 10-minute drive. And I did see him at a grocery store once when I was really young, but I didn't know who he was, but everyone was like freaking out. But yeah, he was really into the public sphere. Like he didn't care about his fame really. He was super friendly to a lot of people. So everyone, to Minnesota, you can talk Prince, everyone. That's a whole tangent that I've went in for the first like 5 podcasts, and I realized, okay, people don't want to hear me talk about Prince for 5 minutes.
Oh, no, you can, but here, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another Minneapolis favorite of mine is Gabriel and the Apocalypse back here.
Oh, yep.
I'm friends with them and Lindy and the band now, but I know I love Minneapolis. I love actually the final night of the tour I booked for Auditor Army from Florida is at the Poorhouse in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I might have to go check that out then. We'll get the dates done later. But before I ask you the second question, I was going to ask this earlier and I totally forgot. But one of the things I did notice about Minneapolis when I started this, because I mainly did like Minneapolis artists just to get a base, is that there's a huge metal genre there. Like I never understood why that metal would be like the big genre. But then there's so many bands there. I would have thought like Prince music, like the pop music would have been more popular, but as it was. But being in the Chicago area, what would you say is the dominant genre there?
In Chicago, wow, cover bands. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a lot of it, the dominant key factor here is cover bands because that's what makes the money.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And cover or tribute bands actually.
Oh.
Because there's a lot. People are they're scared to go to discover new music. I think, and there are so many great artists that are electronic, that are acoustic. My helper intern, he does an acoustic show and he's brilliant. Mm-hmm. But cover bands and tribute bands.
Oh, all right. So for our second question, out of all the artists that have ever lived, dead or alive, doesn't matter, you can choose either one. If you could perform one show with any artist, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, that's an even split because I can't answer that. Well, because one is living and one is dead.
We can do both then.
Okay, allow me to that because I can't split it.
Yeah,
I've got too many musical genres that are. Prince would be my dead.
Mm-hmm.
No, the hands down. Anybody that knows me knows Prince.
Yep.
And the other would be somebody just out of the gate would be Sandy Patty. Nobody knows her. She's a contemporary Christian singer that started in the late '70s, and she's been a huge inspiration for me musically.
Oh. And
as a person, I've met her many times. She's a great humanitarian and such. But I would, Sandy Patty and Prince, 2 very different genres. So.
I'll have to give Sandy Patty a listen. I mean, it sounds interesting. I'll definitely have to. I'll leave a link down below too for everyone there. I'll listen to some of her music and I'll leave stuff down below. So for third, out of all the venues on the planet, if you could play a show at any venue on the planet, where would it be and why? And I have to disclaimer: Red Rocks is disqualified because that show's already won. Like 9 people chose it first, so I was like, "Yep, nope, can't. It's out." So other than Red Rocks, if you could play at any venue on the planet, where would it be and why?
Red Rocks would not be one, actually.
Thank you.
I've been on the stage at Red Rocks. It's awesome.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's no longer in existence. Would be Cobo Hall.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's where Kiss Alive was recorded.
Yeah.
So I would have to say Cobo Hall. Madison Square Garden would have to be after that. That's every rock and roll's dream. It's like, and being able to say goodnight, Detroit.
Yeah. That is currently in second place now. Now we've got 5 for Madison Square Garden because I just added both for the things since one was defunct and one's still existing. So now we get to the real nitty gritty. Guilty pleasure songs. What is a guilty pleasure song that most people that know you would not guess that you enjoy?
I don't know that I can answer that because I musically
You're pretty open about your music.
I'm very open about my music. I'm extraordinarily eclectic with my music because And all of my friends know I love Sandy Patty, and most all of my, everybody knows I love Prince. And then I guess I get the hardest time for being a huge Striper fan.
Oh, okay.
So I guess that would be I wouldn't say that's a guilty pleasure. I'd say that's the one I get the hardest time for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I was going to say number 5 is guilty pleasure genre.
Guilty pleasure genre. I guess club music would probably be guilty pleasure genre because, when you're about 5 craft beers in and there's no metal around, you're just in for a dance, hey, there's some club music playing, why not?
Yeah. So now these are the added ones that I just added on for business. If there's one band in history that you could represent, who would it be and why?
Kiss.
Kiss? Yep.
And why? Just
Kiss. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really into Kiss until maybe the last few years when I started watching some of their documentaries and really listening to their music. And yeah, they were the first really big band that did all the huge shows, and it's just it was super. And their music is still great. I like Strutter, Love Gun, all that stuff. It's classic music that they're such a part of American culture.
This is very true. It's rock history. Unfortunately, they're not so great nowadays. But back in the day, my favorite Kiss is 80s Kiss, non-makeup. But I love all Kiss, but no, non-makeup 80s Kiss was my favorite, just because they had to show themselves off as musicians. They couldn't rely on the face paint anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that ends our questionnaire part, and we have a few more questions. Firstly, if someone were to walk up to you on the street and say, hey, I'm trying to form this band, what would be the best piece of advice that you'd have for them when it came to forming the band or for them to be successful?
Make sure you find people who are willing to put as much work into it as you. Make sure they've got the talent and the drive behind to do it as well. They may not be the greatest musician at the time, but if they've got the drive, they'll grow as a musician. So that's definitely right there. Would be find people who are willing to put in the work and time and energy as much as you would.
And if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, it doesn't matter which, what would be your piece of advice for your musical career? What would be the best piece of advice you give yourself?
Don't stop singing. Get back in a band. That would have been me 10 years ago. It was stay in a band.
Yeah. So do you have any plans of revisiting Sweden and going back there, or are you going to stay here for a while?
Oh, no, I'm planning on booking shows in Sweden.
Oh, yeah?
I'm planning on taking my ghouls, which is what I call Amsterdam. I'm taking my ghouls worldwide. So
nice.
No, definitely, I've got music ties in Sweden. People in bands that I've met and that I just as a fan that have become friends. And actually, if I ever do a solo album, 2 of them are supposed to be featured guests on it. So I'm more than happy to jump over there and book some bands. So yeah, I'm definitely going back. Plus, I have got good friends over there.
Yeah, I forgot to ask. You said you performed one show in Sweden. What was that like?
It was different because at the time I did not speak Swedish. So it was actually for a talent contest, just because we were trying to get. This is what you do when you're trying to promote a band. You do what you can. So we went part of this talent contest, and I was probably a good 300 pounds at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I still put on a show like I was 100. And the guy that was trying, they had to do a Q&A after we got done, and I couldn't do the Q&A because I didn't know the language. So I just had to let the band speak. And I'm like, what was he saying? And it was just kind of interesting to hear what questions he had. But it was just different because I was singing for people who didn't know who I couldn't interact with at the time, but the music did the talking because even if they didn't know my song, the song had enough energy. So
I got to ask, because we've had a nutritionist on here, we've had other fitness related people that are coming on. How did you lose the weight? What was your method?
I was fortunate enough to have a little help with that, and I'm not ashamed to say that I did have a gastric bypass surgery. But a lot of people have such a negative connotation with getting the surgery. They think it's a big cure-all, and it's not. It was a lot of hard work. I basically hit a wall losing my weight, and I'd gotten so far, and I couldn't get it anymore. And my doctor in Sweden said that I should probably look into getting the surgery done. And I did, and I'd do it again if I had to, because it helped motivate me to keep the weight off. Last year, I did a 200-mile bike ride.
Wow.
It was 100 miles up to Wisconsin and back, so 100 up, 100 back. I've ran a couple of 5Ks. I eat pretty well. I try to remain as healthy as possible, but I do love to cook, so I don't always eat everything I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
But no, that's basically it. It was the starter for me, the kickstart for me to lose the weight, and I've just maintained it off. It's 6 years this year.
Oh, wow. All right, now we have 2 final questions remaining. What would you say is the big difference between booking shows, maybe as in like the Midwest and other regions of the country? Is it different to kind of book those shows? Are they looking for different genres? Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't really gotten a book outside of like Illinois or Wisconsin. Minneapolis is the first time that I've actually branched out of Minneapolis, I guess, is still considered the Midwest, but it's a little different, because I think a lot of it is the venues, depending on the venue, that certain venues have music genres that they're more apt to book. Mm-hmm. And with the place where I don't think they really necessarily do a lot of metal. Mm-hmm. And I've got 3 genres of metal playing at this venue, and they're like, well, you've got this X amount of time, we'll bring you in, da-da-da-da, but booking metal is hard. Mm-hmm. A lot of venues don't want it, because it is such a hard thing to bring a crowd into. But once the crowd finds the band, then that's when the crowd will start coming. But I would have to just say that, just booking a certain genre is hard. Mm-hmm. Booking metal genre is probably the hardest.
Where can people or bands who are interested in maybe getting a hold of you, where can they get in contact with you? Do you guys have a website? Do you guys have other pages? I know you guys have a Facebook, but where else can people find you?
Facebook right now. We're building a website. My tech guy up in Wisconsin, I have a professional website builder. He actually is a social media professional as well. I don't mess around. It's I always bring people in who know what they're doing. And so we're working on a website right now. Facebook is pretty much where you go. It's LS Management and Productions on Facebook. It's a little LS that looks like a Chicago flag. But that's pretty much it right now. Call my cell phone, email me. I'm pretty much open to talking to whoever. But that's about it right now. Like I said, we're still growing. And mm-hmm. I have 2 people who help me as far as getting going to gigs and what have you, and then I've got my tech guy up in Wisconsin, and which funny, he used to work for adult entertainers in Las Vegas.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, he's pretty much seen it all.
Yeah. Oh, and I quickly forgot, this will be the last question, but when it comes to your social media and your marketing, what were the struggles that you kind of started out with? Are you overcoming them, and has it been a big adjustment when it comes to promoting a company as opposed to maybe promoting your band?
When you have a good band, the band will also promote you. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I do. It's I don't really necessarily care so much about promoting my company unless it's got to do with venues. Bands will find you if they need you. If I'm out and about, here's my card, hey, maybe we could book a show or something, and then it'll lead up to that. I mean, I've reached out to bands, but actually, hashtags. I freaking hate hashtags. I hate having to hit and type all this crap out on a hashtag. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of copy and pasting going on that I do as far as hashtags. But social media, I'd say, the biggest pain, literally, for me is hashtags and remembering to put them there.
I know, absolutely. I did on Instagram all the time. I always struggle with that. So, we really appreciate having you on. It was great talking to you. Again, people, LS Management and Productions will have the links to all their stuff down below. Go check these guys out. Go check out the bands also that they represent. Well, oh yeah, lastly, what are the names of the bands that you represent?
I have Amzadel, which was my first that I started managing. Mm-hmm. I have Black in the Day that I manage. I work with 13 Monsters and Sky Ghost. They've been around for years around the Chicago area, and if you ever, And then I booked a tour for Auditor Armory from Florida. They're friends of mine. Amzadel and another band who is not with my company, Jury Affairs, is on tour with them, 4-date tour here in the Midwest. And then I pretty much just book whoever. So I've got like I said, I've got bands coming at me from all over the United States now, and even one from Italy.
Wow.
That I've been talking to about bringing over. So.
Yeah, we'll leave a link down below to all those bands too if we can get it. And I mean, we greatly appreciate having you on. If you have anything that you need to promote ever, just message me on Facebook. I'd be more than happy to share it on here. No questions asked. You have a tour for a band you want to promote, or if you have a big show. Oh yeah, and when is that show for that band that you're talking about is coming into Minneapolis? Do you have a date for that?
Yes, I do, actually. The first night for the tour is September 12th at Library Lounge here in Chicago. September 13th, we're at Cairo Ale House in West Chicago. September 14th, we are in West Allis, Wisconsin at Crimson Club. We love Crimson Club. And then September 15th, we're at the Poorhouse downtown Minneapolis, which I am excited for. We're actually taking a real quick drive by Paisley Park. Because I'm like, if you guys are a band, you guys are in music, you have to go see Paisley Park.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
we're going to drive by Paisley Park.
Absolutely. So yeah, everyone, those dates, if you're in that area, go and check this band out. I mean, I really have a positive feeling about this company. I mean, it seems like you really got your stuff together and you're really like going to be successful forward. So I mean, we wish you nothing but the best of luck. Again, anything that you need, let us know. We're more than happy to have you on again if you want to talk about some other things. We'd love to have you. But this is DD on the Spot. Ryan Johnson signing out. Have a great day, everyone.